Let's get one thing straight. Wars do not simply appear out of thin air. They are the grim result of a long, often tedious series of events. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine is no exception. It began long before the first tanks rolled across the border in February 2022. You have to rewind the clock. Go back to 1991 when the Soviet Union collapsed. Ukraine declared its independence. For a moment, it seemed a new era was possible. Russia, weakened and chaotic, appeared to accept this new reality, but old habits die hard. The idea of Ukraine as truly sovereign never quite sat well in the Kremlin. It was a wound to their pride. Timeline: 1991, 2004, 2014, 2022. The timeline of this conflict is littered with flashpoints. Each event is a link in a chain, a long and sorry tale. You cannot understand this conflict without grappling with history, or rather, with competing versions of it. Russia and Ukraine share a common origin story. It begins in a medieval state called Kievan Rusi. This civilization was centered, as the name suggests, in Kyiv. Both trace cultural and religious lineage back to this point. For many Russians, this means they are one people. In Kyiv, that view is not shared, not by a long shot. Ukrainians see a distinct people and language, repeatedly suppressed by a larger neighbor. They point to centuries of imperial rule and the systematic suppression of the Ukrainian language. They recall the Holodomor of the 1930s, engineered by Stalin, which killed millions. In 1991, Ukraine became independent, its borders internationally recognized. For the Kremlin under Vladimir Putin, the loss of Ukraine was a catastrophe. Narratives of denazification and denied statehood grew from distorted history. Two nations, the same past, entirely different worlds, a recipe for disaster. The year 2004 was a watershed moment. A presidential election pitted starkly different visions. Viktor Yushchenko looked west. Europe, democracy, transparency. Viktor Yanukovych was Moscow's preferred candidate. The old way. Yanukovych was declared the winner, but reports of fraud were widespread. Ukrainians refused a stolen election and poured into the Maidan. Weeks of peaceful, determined protest in bitter cold. The Supreme Court annulled results and ordered a revote. In the revote, Yushchenko won decisively. A stunning rebuke to Moscow. Many Ukrainians yearned for a European future, not Russian autocracy. For the Kremlin, influence was slipping. The seeds of future conflict were sown. Fast forward to late 2013. The president, Viktor Yanukovych, he pulled out of an EU agreement under Moscow's pressure. Fury and betrayal followed. The protests, Euromaidan, the revolution of dignity, began peacefully. The state's response turned violent. Pitched battles escalated through winter. Government snipers opened fire. Over 100 killed. Yanukovych fled. A new pro-Western government formed in Kyiv. Moscow called it a Western-backed coup. A hostile government had seized power. Russia would not risk losing Sevastopol and the Black Sea Fleet. In late February 2014, unmarked soldiers appeared across Crimea, professional, well-equipped. Key infrastructure fell in days, a masterclass in hybrid warfare. A referendum condemned as illegal claimed 97% in favor. A part of sovereign Ukraine was absorbed into the Russian Federation. It shattered the post-Cold War order, the first forcible annexation in Europe since World War II. Meanwhile, in the Donbas, a new conflict began to simmer. In spring 2014, unrest spread across Donetsk and Luhansk, the Donbas industrial heartland. Government buildings were seized, separatist slogans rose, the self-declared Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics emerged. Weapons, funding and fighters flowed in, including, later proven, regular Russian units. Kyiv launched an anti-terrorist operation to reclaim territory. A grinding war of trenches and artillery followed. Donetsk airport became a symbol. In July 2014, MH17 was shot down, 298 killed. Investigators traced it to a Russian book system. Moscow denied involvement and flooded media with alternative theories. Minsk Accords sought a political path and special status for Donbas, but were never fully implemented. From 2014 to early 2022, a simmering war, over 14,000 dead, more than 1 million displaced. Use marketing asset, a destroyed apartment building in the Donbas showing the devastation before 2022. A frozen conflict, bleeding, unresolved, waiting to erupt once more. You cannot discuss this war without talking about NATO, the alliance born after World War II to counter the Soviet Union. From the Kremlin's perspective, relentless expansion toward its borders and broken promises. Former Warsaw Pact states sought Article 5. the shield that an attack on one is an attack on all. In 2008, NATO declared Ukraine and Georgia would become members. No timeline, no plan, but the statement stood. Later that year, Russia invaded Georgia. Message delivered. Eastern Europe sees NATO as a defensive shield against a power that once dominated them. So why did an 8-year conflict explode in February 2022? Putin laid the ideological groundwork, claiming Russians and Ukrainians are one people, Ukraine an artificial construct. He read Western weakness, Afghanistan's chaos, Europe's energy dependence, disunity. He recognized the so-called republics and announced a special military operation. He expected Kyiv to fall in days. A puppet regime installed, a fait accompli. It was a colossal miscalculation, plunging both countries into a catastrophic war. The consequences have been devastating. For Ukraine, the cost is almost incalculable. Entire cities, Mariupol, Bakhmut, millions have fled. The largest refugee crisis in Europe since World War II. The civilian death toll is immense. The true number may never be known. Infrastructure has been systematically targeted and destroyed. For Russia, costs are staggering, often hidden from public view. A war meant to last days became protracted with immense casualties and material losses. Sanctions hobbled the economy, isolation grew, dependence on China and Iran deepened, food and energy prices rose around the world. NATO was re-energized, Finland and Sweden joined, a stable post-Cold War order shattered, nuclear risks back in view, the world taking sides. As of today, the war grinds on. Front lines shift slowly at terrible human cost. Ukraine resists with courage supported by weapons and aid. No clear path to peace.